Hello everyone. In today's episode, we have a new guest, which is Rick, and we're more than happy to talk about where the market is going on. There is a lot of noise, and we are curious about his opinion on the market. So, Rick, thank you so much for being our guest. How are you today?
Yeah, real good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. My pleasure. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation. Rick, for those that maybe have no idea about you and about your company, can you make a quick intro, who you are, what you guys are doing, and why should people give you money?
So my name's Ric Kenworthy. I am the co-founder and CEO of Travli Hospitality. We're based in Scottsdale, Arizona. We're a primarily luxury-based vacation rental management platform. We manage a little over $200 million in assets, over 112 properties currently, and we're growing daily.
Okay, awesome. Congrats for that. And Rick, how do you see now the market? Everyone is talking about a future market change, and sometimes even the client expectation could change a lot. Like their expectations are huge, but the reality is not that huge; it's lower than that. How do you keep up with all of this? Because everything changed so fast.
I mean, we've adopted AI in a lot of the operational elements, not so much in the guest-facing operations, the communications part of it. We believe that people dealing with people is still the way to go, especially when it comes to high-end hospitality. But we've definitely embraced AI when it comes to the back-end operations, the automations, the tech support, all of those types of things. So we have a pretty good blend of both human interaction and automated, AI function as well.
Okay, awesome. That's awesome because there are just a few companies, that adopt AI. Everyone is because old school. We had a lot of meetings with some hotels from Doha, UAE, all of that, and Spanish as well. Majority of them, they have no idea how they can, implement AI. It's just like a basic business they built for years, like referral, people know them, and that's it.
I mean, there's definitely, we have a lot of competitors that have gone all the way down the AI path. I mean, you see influencers and quote unquote experts online that, pitch you on the idea of a fully automated, Airbnb or vacation rental management system. And I think that would probably work in a budget sector maybe, but I don't think that, a full AI model works when you're dealing in luxury hospitality. I mean, obviously, margins are a lot greater when you automate everything and AI everything. But I mean, my own personal frustration trying to get things done using AI when it comes to servicing my vehicle or waiting on hold for my, internet provider or any of those things, my frustrations with that, and then my history of travel, those two things, it's just like I'm not going to subject my guests to that until it's perfect. I'm not saying that we won't evolve into a greater percentage of our operational items coming from AI, but in the moment we still believe people dealing with people when it comes to the actual hospitality side of things, and using the AI sort of behind the scenes, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And what is something that you understand the most within the luxury short-term rental and everything that most companies, property management companies, get this wrong or they are misunderstood?
I mean, I think that a big part of that is forgetting that when you are a short-term rental manager, you are managing people's experiences. I think that we've evolved into a world where people are actually removing the vacation part of the vacation rental industry and understanding that you're dealing with people's experiences. I mean, their vacations are predicated on your support systems, and I think that one of the things that people really forget, when you're managing assets and we're talking about the value of your portfolio and things like that, at the end of the day, none of it exists without the guests. And if you're not very guest forward in the way that you run your company, you just can't be successful. Again, if you're in more of a budget category, you can probably get away with it because I think the expectations are probably lower to begin with. And maybe it evolves into a place where there's a happy kind of blend in the luxury space also. But I think that mistake of everybody getting sold into everything automated, everything AI, chatbots, all of those things, I think that's a mistake that people are making. And still trying to
think they know something because of the AI and everything. They think, can cut corners or skip the steps. But imagine there are companies, especially in the hotel and hospitality for years, 10 years plus.
The cutting corners part of it. I think AI has made it easier really for everything. for everybody to cut corners. I mean, that's really the reality of it. You don't have to work as hard because you have this, AI backup plan for just about everything. And for what it's worth, we use AI a lot. So it's not like I'm 100% against AI. I mean, AI understands after some education, Airbnb algorithms and things like that, to where, we've trained our LLMs to understand policy. We upload changes in policy and different things all the time. And being a pro host, we get a little bit better information, I think, on certain things from, straight from platforms to understand their algorithms better. And once you've trained your LLMs to do that, then things like, listing descriptions and titles and the SEO component of, visibility and things like that, then it's definitely a great tool. And then, basic automations like sending out check-in instructions and coordinating cleanings and things like that, then, none of that's guest facing. And so, there's a lot of things that, we still lean on AI for. So it's not like we're totally against it. It's just our touch points, which is our communication with our guests, is still people dealing with people.
Yeah, amazing. Like, it's relationship, like that's, I think, the number one reason people can come back to the hotel and everything, because of the relationship, how was their experience and so on. If you take a look back 10 years ago, what advice could you give to yourself that could not simplify the process, but just, maybe there were some steps that was a little bit harder, or just tough lessons as well?
If I could go back 10 years ago, which is about when we started, I would tell myself to trust the process a little bit more, to delegate and do the things that your support staff are there to do. One of the mistakes that I made early on was trying to wear every single hat and do every single thing. And that works when you have 8, 9, 10 properties, but when you have 100, that simply doesn't work. I mean, you're going to wear yourself so thin, or you're going to implode from the inside out. And, we had a pretty significant boom in prospects and clients and investors wanting to be in Arizona, just after COVID. It's kind of was the gold rush, I guess. And we kind of joke now that it was the fool's gold rush, but, we saw a lot of our competitors that were very similar in size to us at the time, take every single client that came knocking. And, what happened was they didn't have the infrastructure to support any of that. And a lot of them, like I said, imploded from the inside out. So we've always done, a bit of hiring first. And then once we have the pieces in place, then we expand on our portfolio and start a marketing push to get new clients. But, that's one of the things that I probably, 10 years back would be trust the process. Don't try to do every single thing, nurture your people to be what they're supposed to be. And that's support staff, and bring them up along the way and coach them into a position to where it makes your life a little bit easier. We've adopted that now, but again, it's 10 years later, that we could have saved a lot of time and headaches and sleepless nights had I practice what I preach now back then.
I'm curious about something. I had a conversation with another guy where they own around 300 hotels in UAE and also European market. And he talked me about something, survive mode, and also when his mind was a little bit chill in order to make better and better decision. And he was for survive mode for years, like 5 years plus. He was doing wrong in that survive mode, but was, he had to do something. Have you had any situation in survive mode? And if yes, what actually was like the point was scaling the company? Was when you were in survive, or after you, was more like chilled on the mind to have a clear mind to operate everything?
I mean, it's hard to pinpoint when we started to pivot in that direction, but I mean, we had 9 properties that my wife and I, kind of teamed up on. We both still had our regular jobs, and we got to about 9. And it was becoming so cumbersome that, it was affecting, mostly my day job. And so, that was the point where it was kind of like the light bulb clicked on. It's like, hey, this is the point where, you need to decide if this is going to be a real business or if it's still going to continue to be a side hustle. And I think, that was the August of 2020. That was when, like I said, everything was growing. And, that was the point where it was kind of like, okay, this is a real business. There's something really here. And then, then obviously trying to teach yourself, if you're not an entrepreneur by trade or you haven't built businesses, you kind of are, it's a lot of trial and error and ultimately a lot of failure in order to succeed. But I think for us, that moment was about 9 properties when I decided to jump in and do this full time. And then that was when we really started to develop a team and infrastructure and policies and all the things that real businesses should have with no experience doing it. So a lot of trial and error came with that.
Awesome. Congrats for that. And how do you balance, keeping the guest experience on the hotel on the same way while, protecting the margins to not blow up the operational costs? Because everyone wants to do more than they were promising sometimes.
I mean, I think keeping the human element involved, you can't, unfortunately, the way that the society is structured, you wouldn't have any margins if you didn't have the ability to use, let's just say, overseas virtual assistants and things like that, where you can still keep the people element into it. I mean, if we had to pay Arizona prices for every single person in our portfolio that handles the guest facing touch points, it would be extremely difficult to do. So you have to try and find the balance between, okay, do I go down the chat bot or the AI reply or purely AI, or that would be the least expensive because you buy a piece of tech on a subscription, or the next least expensive, which is potentially utilizing people's talents overseas, and we've gone that direction. For now, unless AI gets dramatically better, we still, that's where, hospitality comes first, is where the people are actually dealing with the people. And that's kind of a debatable subject for a lot of people in my position, is because, some people can tout their margins, but, they're not, as highly rated as maybe some other companies like ours, or, they don't get as many repeat clientele. So there's trade-offs for all of it. We do get a lot of repeat guests because they appreciate that they can deal with real people. If they have a real question, it's not, phone prompts through option 1, option 2, option B. They're talking to a real person to understand a real issue and then coming up with a real solution that doesn't have to filter through a bunch of, mess to get to a real solution. And we're going to hang on to that model for as long as it's sustainable, and I think that that's a place where, you could have a lot of heated discussion with a lot of managers in that topic and figuring out what's more important, your bottom line or the happiness of your guests. Because at the end of the day, you start to dwindle on your reviews, and that, goes directly towards your visibility, and which goes right toward your bottom line.
And for example, when these like Airbnb and all of these OTAs like change a rule or a fee, how much, does that mess with the company overall? Like what changed overall?
I think when Airbnb changed their fee structure, it was welcomed to a certain extent. Clearly, we would all prefer that it wasn't so much, but with the transfer of the fees from the guest side to the host side, allowed you, if you know what you're doing, to kind of compensate for it in an invisible way. I think the perception guest side of the OTAs, with their fees and everything, I think the perception is, they for years and years and years, they expect to get through the checkout process, and then, obviously there's going to be taxes and fees and all these things included at the end. And I think that they were trained that way. But I think that more travelers, and our data supports it, that, they appreciate kind of the one fee model wherever it goes. At the end of the day, they all charge commissions. They all got to make money. We play in Airbnb's world mostly because Airbnb is the prominent OTA here in Arizona. And so everything that we do caters to the way Airbnb operates. And for us, the moment that they made that switch, they also kind of pivoted a little bit more as they try to build their brand loyalty into supporting pro hosts like us that have a proven track record of success. So those two things together, I think really contributed to, we've had a record first 6 months of this year by a wide margin. And we attribute a lot of that to a one fee model, regardless of how much it is. I read blogs and Facebook groups and everything. Everybody's crying the blues about this 15.5%. But if you know what you're doing and you mark it up correctly and do the correct thing, at the end of the day, the price is the same. Whether you're one of the hosts that's independent that had to just switch recently, or you're a pro host, with a PMS that had to switch back last fall, at the end of the day, the price is the same. It's just how it's portrayed to the consumer. And I think the consumer very much appreciates a one fee model, regardless of what the fees are. Seeing what the true nightly rate is going to be with everything included, except for the taxes, I think has created a little bit more trust, I think, in the process. And it's been a welcome change for us. We don't I mean, again, we would wish that the OTAs charged less money, but at the end of the day, your business relies on that, and so you have to pivot. And if you pivot the right way, it made life a little easier, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's so hard now for having, like direct bookings. Like you need to be active on social media, TikTok and everything, because no one is going to find, the name of a hotel or location. They might see a view or something and they are going to remember. But changing that, moving the traffic, let's say from OTA to a direct channel could change a lot, but it's a little bit hard.
Yeah, direct booking. A lot of people try to pivot towards direct bookings. That's everybody's answer. Oh, let's fire Airbnb and we're going to go build our business based on direct bookings. And, you have to have a massive marketing budget to really go against a VRBO or an Airbnb to try to capture those direct bookings. I mean, clearly it's easier to market to your previous guests within the confines of policy, but it's not as easy as just flipping that switch and saying, hey, tomorrow we're going to just do more direct bookings. You don't get that. You don't have that luxury just to turn it on and it works.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of risk that comes with that. When we turned on direct bookings the first time, we weren't ready, and that was one of the failures that we learned a lot of really important lessons from, is because if you don't have very good security protocols and fraud detection and identification verification and things like that, you can get burned really fast. So just for the random person with 10 properties that just signed up for a PMS that says, oh great, I have a direct booking site now, and they're out pushing that like crazy on social media, you're opening yourself up to a whole another set of issues that you have to get ahead of that before you take that leap, because it can really hurt a lot of things if you do it in haste and don't think it all the way through.
I can agree with you 100%. How much money, like Airbnb, Booking.com, they invest a lot of money in marketing, like billions of dollars on every single year, like to market everything, like to diversify the channels and so on. What do you think would make, someone that is going on Airbnb or Booking, even in my case, when I want to, book a spot or something, you go through on reviews and everything. What can be something, to make location different on these OTAs to choose this one and not the other 100, let's say? It's based on the reviews, the view of the location, the price. I think it are multiple factors here, not just one.
I think a clear understanding of each platform's algorithm is probably the most important part of that. Understanding what triggers your visibility. And let's just use Airbnb as an example, because again, they're king here in Arizona. You play by Airbnb's rule book, and then everything else kind of falls into place. But you have to have a real understanding of the algorithm. So you don't necessarily, and this is at the highest surface level. So an understanding of the algorithm to make sure that your visibility is at a premium. So your properties are showing up more often than your competition. That's the very baseline, easy top level, an understanding of the algorithm. So the things that you need to do to trigger the algorithm to show your properties first. Then you have to have obviously the aesthetic component. So, if you're taking iPhone photos and trying to pass those off as professional, you're not getting the right angles. You don't understand the hero photos and the 4 photos that follow that really tell the story. You don't understand, kind of the flow, how the photos should go. Like ours start with the hero photos, and then it starts at the front door and works its way through the property. It's kind of like a photo tour. So aesthetic is the next phase of that. I mean, you can get shown first on the platforms, but if you don't have something that's going to catch people's attention, that's the next phase of it. And then clearly after that, if they're narrowing it down to 1 or 2 properties, you can differentiate yourself, and justify charging a little bit more money. One, we're professionally managed. We have an infrastructure, we have a prep team, we have a cleaning crew that are professionals. We have inspections, we have quality checks, we have all of these things that come from renting from a brand rather than an individual. And then obviously your reviews. If you are a guest favorite or a gold level guest favorite, which is top 10% or 5, those properties stand out kind of by default. But it's just a combination of all of that. But the most important is understanding the algorithm, because you can have the best, most marketable listing out there, but if you show up on page 10, you got no shot. We have a first 5 rule, and we do A/B testing with new listings, and we figure out which combination of photos, titles, whatever, over the first couple of weeks of a listing going live, attractive views and those types of things. And, understanding which combinations of things convert. We're almost 11,000 reviews, and we're still over 4.9 stars. We're the only Arizona management company with that volume of reviews that still maintains superhero status. So we have a little bit of an unfair advantage when it comes to visibility, just purely by default. You list with us, your properties show up first. And that's just because of what we've built from a trust perspective with the OTAs. But again, if you're showing up on page 12, 13, 14, 15, 20, then your only real way to excel or get to the top is be the cheapest price and hope that people are filtering by price. At the same time, that's seasonal. In the summertime, it's almost here in Arizona because we have a pretty catastrophic drop off. If you also don't diversify in your offerings and go look at more midterm and other things for the summer times, you're going to fail instantly. And if you don't utilize all of the different discounts and triggers with Airbnb, you're going to get lost. Visibility is king. Your visibility comes from conversion, and if you're not converting, you're not visible, and you're done. Your only way to combat that is with price, and clearly that is a negative impact on your bottom line.
Instead of the value that you bring on the table, you just be comparing on the price and everything, like being outpriced by other. Okay. And Rick, if you could have like a magic wand, like Harry Potter, to have a wish, what wish would you have to remove something within the market?
I think kind of the cliche answer would be regulation. If I could wish away regulation, but most of the regulation is welcomed. I wish that we could instantly eliminate all of the other operators that make operators look bad. There's, absentee owners, uninvested owners, and by uninvested, I mean not necessarily monetarily, but mentally. I wish that there was a way to cut out 30% of our competition that's not operating at a level that really exudes hospitality. And then the rest of us that really take this seriously can all thrive. There's a lot of competition. We're probably one of the top 5 or 6 most competitive markets in our country. And, when people ask me about saturation and competition, all these things, honestly, we look at 30% of them as not even really existing. They're poorly managed. They don't have any infrastructure. Their marketing is horrible. They're dated. They're, deferred maintenance. They just don't show well. Any number of things. And most of those properties are coming for sale at some point or another anyway. But I wish it's to eliminate the components of our industry that make those of us that take it seriously look bad.
And last question is that how do you see the market within the next few months from now? I think it's hard to predict for the next few years because everything is like chaos. Everything changes on a daily basis. But for the next few months, like by the end of the year, what do you think can change?
The short-term rental industry changes almost every single day, and every market is different. So it's hard for me to say on a global level what I foresee. I do see a lot of this evolution and these people trying to pitch these AI-run businesses, and I fear that that's going to bring down the quality of our industry as a whole. I saw 2 of them this morning. Maybe my algorithm on my phone knew I was having this chat with you today. I don't know, but these fully AI run management companies, like, hey, I'm going to go find an independent operator. I'm going to steal all of his photos. I'm going to use AI to create this dynamic video, and then I'm going to sell them the video and the management of it and all of these other things that's just not real. You can enhance photos and add people and make the properties look better than they are. And at the end of the day, that's only going to hurt you rather than help you. You might get a boost in conversion, but then they're going to show up and the property doesn't fit, what the photos show.
Yeah.
And I just fear that all of these fully automated, short-term rental management companies, whether it's in Scottsdale or Arizona or any other market in any other country, I just think that's going to bring the quality down. And I think that initially that will hurt us all. But I think that it'll probably rebound because I just don't think that that's a sustainable model. I think that, everything automated by AI is going to leave a lot of touch points uncovered. And I think that people will steer away from the companies that operate that way. It might be one of these fad kind of gimmicks in the moment. But I think once we weather that storm, I think it'll bounce back. Regulation in pretty much every jurisdiction is getting, a little bit more aggressive. Our market in the next few months, I see a boom because we're in the summer and it's just horrible. So, for us looking short term, we just, count down the days until Labor Day when our season starts to come back around. But we're experiencing record growth. Owners in Arizona want to work with us. They see what we put out from a marketing perspective. I share numbers. I'm very, very transparent. I'm not going to go and tell somebody their property is something that it's not just in order to get the contract. We probably say no 3 times to every one yes. It's got to be a good fit from the property. It's got to be a good fit from the owner. It's got to vibe right, as far as the relationship first. I see a positive impact from a lot of these different things. And, I definitely see a pretty good rebound. This is the first year, 2026, the first 6 months or first quarter, and then second quarter were the first time from a market perspective that we saw an increase in every one of the metrics that we track. The KPIs we track are obviously occupancy percentage, but average nightly rates, length of stay, lead times, and RevPAR. And Q1 and Q2 of 2026 saw, huge growth on our end individually, but also our market. And so that's the first time in 5 years that we've seen positive KPIs on all 5 of the ones that we track. So that's a pretty good sign. And I do believe that some of the operators that just aren't up to par, I think we're starting to see more of them falling out, and it's just giving us a little bit more of a boost as this industry evolves here.
Another guy, the UE guy, mentioned that there was an agency like Images with $20 and they were charging thousands of dollars every single month for that. Like I think it's a lot of noise.
Yeah, you got to be careful. There's some really good tools, but it's very easy to abuse.
Yeah.
You use AI to create something that's imaginary, and you have to be super careful when you try to take it to the nth degree. And we use AI in our marketing, because it's gotten way more dynamic. If I think of something in the moment and I need a reel or a story or something or an image, I can create one on any number of LLMs in 2 minutes. So it definitely has helped with the efficiency of, putting ideas out there and marketing things. But if you abuse it and all of a sudden you're doctoring up every image of your property and you're creating something that's more imaginary than real, it'll only come back to bite you in the long run.
Rick, where people can find more details about you and also about your company as well?
Our website is gotravli.com, Travli, so gotravli.com. I publish blogs often for other operators. I like to dig into, some of the trends, mostly in our particular market, but there's a lot of things that hosts can take away from the blogs. Obviously, the links to social media are there. We're launching, new products and new, initiatives inside of our own company all the time. I'm never afraid to mentor. I mentor a couple of smaller managers to make sure they don't make some of the same mistakes that I did as we were growing. And there's a lot of really good content.
Rick, thank you so much for everything you shared with us in today's episode. I'm going to put your link as well in the description for you guys. Check out for Rick LinkedIn as well, and also our website. Thank you so much.